Welcome everyone. So today we're going to talk about the exposure triangle, and this is one of the main things that you really have to understand to get good with manual mode. So let's just dive into the slides and we will see you there. So as we all know, everyone is a photographer until they get into manual mode and then they are usually confused. But I'm sure you're not one of them. And if you don't know manual mode yet, then you're going to definitely master it in these sessions. So let's just dive into the exposure triangle here. So we already talked about ISO, shutter speed, and aperture in our previous lessons, but these three together are exposure triangle. So to get the correct exposure, you need to have the good combination of aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and these three are the photographic triangle. And to understand this one even better is that why should we understand the exposure triangle? So exposure triangle helps us understand more about light. And this is one of the main things here. And if one of them variables changes, at least one of the other must also change to maintain the correct exposure. So for example, if you change your ISO, then you might need to change your shutter speed or aperture or something like that, because if they're all connected and they work together with each other basically. And to change these kind of things, you have to understand the stop of light. So a stop refers to the doubling or halving of the amount of light that makes up an exposure. So what you usually do when you have your DSLR camera is that you scroll your aperture or shutter speed, and you add a stop of light by doubling the exposure will brighten up an unexposed image. So what you just have to do is just scroll it. Like in every camera is a little bit different, but usually they are on your thumb or here, and then you just scroll it. So adding a stop of light by doubling the exposure will brighten an underexposed image. So increasing an exposure by one stop will darken an overexposed image. So this is the main thing that you have to understand. But if you didn't understand it yet, then wait for it, because we will dive deeper into this one. So what you have to do here is add or take away a stop of light. So change the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So we also talked about these ones. So you already know this one, I'm pretty sure. ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So the smaller the number of aperture, more light comes in, and higher number, less light in. So these are one of the basic things that you already understand, but now it's like we just focus on the thing that these three work together. So again, I'm gonna repeat this one again because this is super important part of here. So for any given exposure, if three variables change, you must adjust one or both of the others in the opposite direction. So as you saw, if you change your shutter speed or ISO or aperture, then you have to change one of the others. So this is super important to understand the exposure triangle again. Sorry if I'm repeating this one too many times, but this is the key to understand this one. And for example, if you decide to decrease your shutter speed by 2 stops, you will need to increase your aperture or ISO by 2 stops. So you could also change both aperture and ISO by 1 with the same effect. So usually you go like this, 2 stops here, 1 stop here. So you're on the same level, you're working on these ones if you don't want to check your light meter all the time. So a stop is the doubling or halving of the light that makes up an exposure. We can add or subtract stops by changing the aperture, shutter speed, or ISO. And this is the main thing is that the heart of triangle is the light meter. So sometimes, especially when I started out, I was super confused with this. And I was exposure triangle, shutter speed, I didn't get it whatsoever. And once I understood like that I have to just look at my light meter, then I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Like now my photos are exposed well and everything just like works. So with this one, you usually can find this one on your DSLR on the info button, and then you just see your settings or in the viewfinder as well. So here you can see that light meter is here. We talked about light meter in our another session, so definitely if you're confused here, then check out the light meter again. But here, for example, uh, this one has gone like one stop back. So let's just like recap quickly. So aperture, shutter speed, and ISO are the classic photographic triangle. And if one of the three variables changes, you must adjust or both of the others in the opposite direction. So you go like one like this and the other like this, then it's like changing basically. But if you're confused, then just check your light meter. But the main thing to hear is that you have to understand that they are all connected. So if you change one thing, then other will change as well. And finally, that exposure triangle is always watching you. So be careful here. Do not mess up your exposure. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope this was useful and we will see you in the next one. Bye.